What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel. Today, I am joined by Tom Homa. Tom is a graduate assistant soccer coach for the men's team at Augsburg University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Tom, hello. How you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, of course. We're excited that you're joining. We have a lot of listener questions for you, and I'm excited to get into things. If you are joining us on YouTube, please say hello, interact with us if you're here live, or if you're watching in the future. We check the comment section. Please feel free to chime in and, just let us know your thoughts. If you have any questions or whatnot, we'd be happy to ask them as we go along here. So with that, I think we're ready to get into things. Tom, any last questions or anything like that?
Nope. Let's get into it.
All right, let's do it. Tom, welcome to Bros Talking Soccer. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks.
All right, cool. I have a lot I'd like to discuss with you about all of your experiences and college soccer in particular, but let's learn a little bit more about you first. So first off, where'd you grow up and how'd you get into playing soccer?
I grew up in Central Illinois in Springfield and the Peoria area as well. Just my dad had played soccer in college, and he and my mom signed me up to play when I was, I think, 3 years old for my first little, rec team, and just loved it from the start and played my whole life since then.
Nice. And so what positions did you play, throughout your career?
Throughout my career, my whole life, pretty much everywhere on the field, even goalie. But in college, I played left wing for the most part, a little bit of left back and forward.
Do you have a favorite position that you liked to play?
I'd probably say left wing. Yeah.
Left wing. Anything about that? Not a lot of defensive responsibilities. Is that what it is, or anything in particular?
No, it was a ton of running, but I never get tired, so I could handle it, and you kind of have the opportunity to be involved in the three different thirds of the game. So you get to be a part of it all.
Nice. Are you left-footed, or did you just end up on the wing? Are you an inverted winger?
Yeah, but I'm left-footed.
Okay. All right. So you are left-footed. Okay, cool. Nice. I assumed you played club soccer growing up. Now, you're a little bit younger than I am, so you were kind of growing up in the development academy age of U.S. soccer. So did you play development academy, or did you play kind of more traditional route that maybe I was a little bit more familiar with?
No, I went with the traditional route. The academy stuff, I remember my senior year of high school, that kind of started becoming a big thing. I graduated high school in 2012. So one of my high school teammates he played academy for a couple of years when we were in high school, and it was before the rule existed where you can only do one or the other. So growing up, to be honest, I wasn't really familiar at all with what an academy actually was. I mean, I knew that the term existed, but that was about it. And I ended up, just playing in my local hometown club with, friends from the area and school and that sort of thing.
Nice. Awesome. So what were your experiences like playing that? And did you also play high school soccer in addition to that?
Yep. Yeah. So I think, this is certainly different from, today's soccer climate. But when I was in high school, at least in Illinois, high school soccer was the thing, and club soccer kind of took a backseat to the high school game, and that's certainly not the case anymore. So yeah, my high school experience was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and club experience growing up wasn't. I of course learned a lot, so it was a good experience, and that then I grew and learned some things, whether it was from good or bad examples. But the club I played for wasn't. It was pretty poorly run and organizationally a disaster. So that was kind of rough. But as a kid, at least I got to play, and that's what matters most.
Yeah, that's always fun. And yeah, I was reliving the glory days from high school soccer. Someone sent me a photo recently of that. And it was a similar thing where, back then you had hundreds of people coming to games for high school soccer, and it was just awesome. And yeah, I was reliving that literally. I think it was yesterday that I got a piece of mail. So I can completely relate there. I can also relate to, just growing up outside of Philly, there were very strong club teams there, but there was a heavy amount of politics involved in youth soccer. And if you didn't get onto the right team, you weren't scouted to go to the colleges and, costs and everything like that. So I can completely relate to your experiences there growing up. But I do know that you played in college. So can you tell us
Hmm.
where you played and what playing was like in college?
Yeah, so I played at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. I grew up about an hour and a half west of Champaign, and it was kind of always the dream school. You know, my family had gone there, grandparents, cousins, parents, that sort of thing, and I'd always wanted to play soccer. And the unique thing about Champaign was that we don't have an NCAA men's program. We have our men's program is a club team. We do have a women's NCAA program, and so I remember when I was in high school looking around at some different schools around Illinois, Bradley, Illinois Westland, North Central up by Chicago, and I contacted the guys who ran the team at Illinois about their recruiting process and trying out and that sort of thing. And I decided to go to school there and try out right when classes started freshman year. That's when tryouts were, and was lucky enough to make the team because it was, I mean, there were probably 150 kids trying out for only a few spots, and so it was tough. But I mean, it was a great experience overall, and we qualified for the national tournament my junior and senior years, so that was a lot of fun. And that senior year tournament was probably my favorite memory from college overall. So I mean, it was a great experience. My teammates are still my best friends for life for sure. So I'm really thankful that I got to do that. And I also was a practice player and a manager for our women's team in the off season and when I could be there during the fall season as well.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. And I actually played club soccer at Penn State as well, and it was a similar
Yeah.
experience. You got 200 kids showing up for like 8 to 10 spots, at tryouts and stuff like that. So it's very tough to stand out. So it's quite an accomplishment that you made the team and making it to nationals. I remember we made it one year that I was on the team. Other years we were suspended for various activities and whatnot. And so, but it was a fantastic experience. And so after college, let's get into that. And that's kind of what you're doing now. How did you decide to go into coaching versus what I'll say more of a traditional sort of job, corporate or whatnot? What made you decide to go into coaching?
Um, I never really thought about coaching for a career until kind of the second half of college, junior, senior year. And then senior year, I remember at one of the women's practices, their head coach, Janet Rayfield, she's a super well-respected person in the soccer world. And I just remember one day she was just spitting out these little golden nuggets of life lessons related to something we were doing at practice that day with the girls team. And there was like this moment where it just kind of hit me. I was like, wow, like that is awesome. And I think I could do that. And I want to be a college coach. So from that moment on, I mean, that was early on in senior year. I started, working towards building a career in coaching. And after I graduated, I actually was a consultant in Chicago for a year. But during that whole time, I was still kind of thinking about coaching and looking into different jobs and, with colleges and clubs in the Chicago area. Um, but then I just grew to, I was like, you know what, I'm getting out of the corporate world and I need to get into coaching full time at the collegiate level. So I applied for the position here at Augsburg with the men's team, and thankfully Janet was a good reference, and did the interviews and was fortunate enough to get the job.
That's really cool that you had this one sort of almost crystal clear moment where it kind of like hit you. Do you remember anything either specific that she said, or I know you kind of touched on it there, but push a little bit more. Do you remember any specific like one line that she said, or I mean, it's incredible you remember that specific moment in general.
Yeah, I do remember this one. So I mean, it was kind of a combination of several things, but the one line that really stuck out to me, excuse me, was that it's easy to be a good teammate to people on your team who are your best friends, but it's a lot harder to be a good teammate to people you might not be close with or might not even get along with personality wise. And if you want to have a truly great team, you got to learn to be a good teammate to everybody. And I mean, I thought that was pretty insightful. And so that was definitely the highlight of what she had said at the time.
I love it. I love it. Cool. So we have a first Twitter question. So this came from at Soccer Swap, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but maybe I'll reframe it after I ask it. But he said you'll go into his background at some point, but he's eager to know the steps he went through to become. So he being you. So
Mhm.
Soccer Swap is eager to know the steps you went through to become a coach in a country where soccer is not the dominant sport. We touched on a lot of it already, but is there anything additional that you did? Did you get any certifications or anything like that before you had to? Before you became a coach?
Um, yeah, I mean, so you can do like I did the U.S. Soccer, the F license online back when it existed. It no longer exists anymore. They have what's called the grassroots license now. And then I did the E license course, which was an in-person course. And then once I had come to Augsburg, I did the D license. So next step, next year will be the C, and it goes all the way up to A. And then you can get, if you're interested in being a professional coach, they have a professional license as well. Um, but so yeah, those licenses are huge, and if you're, I mean, if you have no coaching experience, whether I would highly recommend either volunteering for a high school or a college team near you, um, or coaching youth club teams, whatever it is, and that's certainly a good way to get your feet wet and get your foot in the door with college coaches if that's something you're interested in long
Nice.
term.
Cool. And so, what are your responsibilities as a graduate assistant coach? So, yeah, recruiting, training sessions, talking with players. I guess what are the specific responsibilities you have?
So yeah, being a grad assistant, your experience is totally unique to the specific program you're at and who your head coach is. I think I'm really fortunate with the head coach I have, Greg Holker. He's been an incredible mentor and role model and friend, and he's totally changed my life. But I'm also lucky in that as a grad assistant here at Augsburg, I think I get to do a lot more than what you would typically think of. Recruiting is for sure the foundation of the job. So doing all the recruiting start to finish, like going out to high school games or showcases, club tournaments, whatever it is, identifying players. A lot of times we have players reach out to us ahead of time, figure out who's good fit for us soccer wise, and then figure out if they're a good fit personality wise based on talking to them in person, on the phone, talking to their coaches and references. And if everything moves, uh, past that point, having them on campus and doing official visits with them, tours, overnights, that sort of thing, figuring out if we want to give them an offer. So recruiting is definitely the foundation, but there's also, I mean, there's tons of other stuff. I as a grad assistant, I feel like I could work 24 hours a day and still not get everything done. So I mean, we use VX Sport. That's our athlete monitoring system. So our guys, they wear the things that look like sports bras and they plug in the GPS tracker in the back. Um, and that's been huge in helping us kind of plan the proper training loads week by week throughout the season and understanding how much stress our guys go through in games and that sort of thing. So doing data analysis on all that stuff on a daily basis during the season and when we're training in the off season is a huge part of the job as well. Running all the social media stuff for our program is pretty. You wouldn't think it would be that big of a deal, but it seems it's a lot more work than it seems like. Um, Certainly talking to players whenever they want to come in and chat in the office, go over film, whatever it is they want to talk about, or go out and do extra training with them on the field or in our dome. Um, I mean, we also this past fall we made a documentary about what it's like to be a part of our program, on a daily basis, and I was kind of the director of that, and we used a production company, Wasp Productions, and had some student interns as well. So that should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. That was a huge project, filming like real behind the scenes stuff every single day, games, practices as well, conversations, interviews. Like it took up a lot of time and effort for sure. And then, I mean, random things come up all the time. We do a lot of, I did a lot of stuff with team building activities, related to motivation or sacrifice or teamwork or our core values. And we would do that, every other day during preseason and then once a week during the season. So being prepared, to essentially, teach a lesson, whatever it is related to. That was a lot of work getting that together. So the responsibilities are endless. I mean, I could go on for, for an hour talking about it.
I love it. I love it, man. You're getting quite the experience there. So, so many things I want to press on and ask more details about. But first off, make sure to send us that video when it comes out. We'll promote it and get it out to listeners because I'm fascinated by it. I'm sure other people would want to see it. So make sure to do that. With the recruitment aspect, you touched on the specific things, but can you take us through like a typical recruitment for a player that you want to get, right? So this isn't someone coming to you, but this is a player that you seek out and you say, all right, we want this player. Maybe you found him at a college showcase. So then what's the next steps that kind of happen throughout the recruiting process?
So if I go to a college showcase and I see a guy who I like, I'll go up to the coach after the game, if possible, and most of the time it is possible. Introduce myself to the coach if I don't already know him, and just make sure we have each other's contact info. Tell him what I liked about the game and the certain kid, and then I'll be in touch to talk about that player. Then, a couple days later, whatever, I'll reach back out to the coach. We talk about the kid. I'll get his contact info, email, phone number, speak with him, introduce myself, get him to fill out our recruit, form, questionnaire, get to know him a little bit, see what he's thinking of doing for college, if he wants to play soccer in college. And if so, is he looking D1, D2, D3? What is he, or NAI, what is he considering, junior college, whatever. And then, figuring out, based on my conversations with him, figuring out who he is as a person, and also based on conversations with, with his references, who are typically going to be other coaches or teachers even. And then assuming that all goes well, then I'll be like, hey, we want you to come to campus for an official visit. It'd be great to have you, we think you have the potential to be a good fit for our team. And then we'll invite them to campus, set up a meeting, for when they get here, we'll set up a meeting for them with our admissions staff. They'll meet with a professor in their academic area of interest. I'll take them on a campus tour. We'll eat lunch or dinner with the players, and then we'll do kind of like a big soccer meeting with our head coach, Greg Hoker, and, the player and his family, and then myself. And that's where Greg kind of steps in and really seals the deal. And he'll give his spiel about, why he does what he does, how we run our program, what's important to him, what's important to us. And we'll ask the recruit a lot of questions about him, about his character, about his family, about his resiliency, to determine if he's a good fit for the program. And then if so, if all that's yes, then, we'll give him an offer. And I mean, I always say that I'm lucky with recruiting, because I feel like all I have to do is get a kid on campus and Greg will convince him to come here. I mean, he's had a lot of experience and he's really good at what he does. But that is true to a certain extent at any program. Getting kids on campus is the key, because your matriculation rate of the kids you get, compared to your whole recruiting pool, is significantly higher if you actually get them to visit campus.
Interesting. And so I probably should have asked this earlier. Are you guys D1, D2, D3?
We are D3, and in the state of Minnesota, there is only Division III men's soccer.
Yep. And so we have some international listeners. So just to quickly clarify that, there's 3 to 4 levels of, athletics in college. And so you'll hear D1 is theoretically the top level, D2 is the second, D3 is the third. The levels vary a lot more for other sports. So like football, D1 really is very different than other levels, and basketball is the same. Soccer is much tighter. And so even though, Tom's at a D3 school, it doesn't necessarily mean that the players are that much weaker, and there's just a breadth of talent in the U.S., and there could be a variety of reasons why players choose to go D3 versus D2 versus D1. And so just wanted to maybe explain that a little bit for for our listeners. I have so many other questions I want to dig into with training sessions and things like that. But for right now, let's put that on pause. Maybe we'll come back to it. And I wanted to follow up. So Scott at the Scott Wegener asked, how do you find kids at your level of college? So you touched on showcases and maybe going to specific events. What is the major way that you guys recruit? Do you ever go to actual high school matches, or is it pretty much strictly showcases?
No, I would say we go to more high school games than showcases.
Interesting.
I mean, certainly high school games are, they occur more frequently than a showcase does. Um, but yeah, since we're lucky for a couple different reasons. So we're in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a pretty big metropolitan area, so there's a ton of high schools, and we're able to go to a ton of high school games, each fall season. Whereas, if you're at a school like where I was, in Champaign, you're not going to be able to go recruiting to high school games multiple times a week because you're in Champaign, Illinois, and while Champaign and Urbana themselves are decent sized towns, there's not really anything around them. So we have a huge, pool of players around us, and Minneapolis is, kind of a haven for immigrants, especially from Africa. So we've got, and soccer is, the world's game. So we've got a ton of people in the area who play soccer, and Augsburg is a pretty diverse institution, not just racially, but socioeconomic status wise and background wise where people come from. So we kind of have a little bit of a natural attraction to, people who have immigrated to the U.S. or people who have families from other countries and they were born in the U.S. and that sort of thing. But the showcases are huge too. I mean, there's tons of players at those, obviously, whether we're watching somewhere in Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Chicago. There's definitely no shortage of players. In fact, I would say the opposite. We're overwhelmed by the amount of kids who are reaching out to us, and combined with, the kids who we're reaching out to in the first place.
Interesting. And so again, for anyone who may not know, Showcase is a tournament, and it's usually a collection of club teams from American, states. Actually, they can be from all over, but it's kids usually in their junior or senior year of high school, so anywhere from 16 to 18 years old, and that's kind of the main recruiting age for college players. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I guess they do touch on sophomores a little bit, but for the most part, it's junior and senior year players. Mm-hmm. Scott also had a follow-up question here. And so you can answer this both from your program's perspective and also your personal philosophy. But do you believe in a certain system do you believe in a certain system, or do you adapt your system around the players you have? And then kind of a tag on to that, do you only recruit a certain type of player for a position, or do you kind of have flexibility with that?
Okay. Those are two really good questions. For the first one, I would say it's a kind of a mix of both. I mean, here at Augsburg, we have our core identity of like how we want to play, and everyone in our conference and even in Division III nationwide knows that we possess the ball. We are notorious for keeping the ball. We outpossess everybody we play, even if we're playing a more talented team. So we know that we need to get kids who are pretty technical and can keep the ball in tight spaces, and they don't freak out when they're under pressure. And that's kind of the opposite of a lot of college programs. You typically see, massive, fast guys who are athletic and can bomb the ball up the field and chase it down. So we have that identity of how we want to play with possession-based soccer, and we don't necessarily have the exact same formation each year. I mean, in 2017, we played a 4-4-2 with a diamond for a while. This past fall, in 2018, we played a 3-5-2 for the most part, and we switched formations, late in the season, the conference tournament, NCAA tournament, since we had so many games right in a row. You've got to tweak your formation a little bit to adjust to the fatigue that you're going through. So I mean, and year to year, it depends on the team. So next year, based on our incoming class and all the returning players, we'll we'll determine what we think is best to start out in preseason in August, and then see how it goes. 2 weeks into it, and we might be like, oh, we need to totally change things up, or we might be like, oh, things are going really well. So yeah, it's you you don't. I think there's a balance for sure. You don't want to be too stubborn, but also you don't want to be changing so much that your players don't understand what's going on game to game.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I see you're also, based on your LinkedIn, coach at BV United, which is a club in the Minnesota area, if I'm correct. So who or what
Yep.
do you coach there?
Yep. Before I answer that, I'll answer the second part of that question with
Oh, my
recruiting.
fault.
Yeah, no worries. So what the type of player we're looking for? I mean, so at the division in general, at the Division 3 level, uh, we're typically not going to be as picky as a top Division 1 coach is going to be. Um, that's and I'm talking about like your top Division 1 programs, top 30 in the country. They're looking for very specific fits. Like they want to have a guy who's a certain height, certain size, like left-footed, can play this position, has scored this number of goals, that sort of thing. And they can be very specific, and they need to be very specific because there's a lot more pressure to get more wins on them. So your lower level Division 1 programs, Division 2, Division 3, there's not as much pressure on the winning side of things. And so we're not quite and I don't want to speak for all coaches, but at least at Augsburg, we're not as, you can't be super, super picky like that, but we look for the type of player we want. And certainly we have certain positions we know that, okay, in this year's class, we need to bring in a couple center backs or a couple wingers or whatever it is. So we look for guys who can play those positions, and if they have the attributes we like, if they can keep the ball, if they can ping it around, if they've got good footwork, if they work hard, that sort of thing. But I mean, finding talented soccer players, I think for any coach is an easy thing to do. But finding somebody who's going to be the right fit personality wise and character wise, that's definitely the harder part.
Gotcha. All right,
Yeah.
cool. So there you have it, Scott. That's all fantastic and really cool insight, kind of behind the scenes stuff. So also saw that you're a youth coach at BV
Mm-hmm.
United. So who do you coach there?
Yep. So I coach this year I'm doing a U15 boys team, and I coached them last year when they were U14, and I'm an assistant coach for the older U18 U19 team as well. And so BV United is out of Burnsville, Minnesota, which is just south of Minneapolis. It's in the suburbs. And Greg, our head coach here at Augsburg, he runs BV United. So a lot of us, assistant coaches from Augsburg on the men's and women's side, and then some of our men's and women's players, a lot of us are coaches for the teams in the club. And certainly we can't do that during the season, but in the winter, spring, and summer, a lot of us are involved with that, and that's been an awesome experience as well. I've learned a ton about soccer coaching from that, because in that arena I'm the head coach of a team, whereas at Augsburg I'm an assistant coach, and it's the college game, so most of your job isn't coaching soccer. But with the youth scene, I'm a head coach, and most of your job is coaching soccer. So I've learned a ton, and just the way that Greg and all of us coaches, the way that we run things, it's incredible. Our culture, I don't think there's another club, or you'd be hard pressed to find another club in the country like it. All of our boys teams are coached by guys. All of our girls teams are coached by women, which is pretty unique. And we do a lot of, coaching staff meetings or in socials and just get-togethers, to share about what we're learning and what we're doing. We have a group me that blows up every day with conversations and articles that people are sending. So it's been a really good club experience. I've never even seen or heard of anything like it in my life in any club until I came here.
Well, that's really cool to hear. You touched on a lot of my sub questions there that I was going to follow up and ask, but more specifically, I wanted to to ask about the difference between college and youth players, and you touched on it a little bit where you're doing more coaching. Can you tell like
Mhm.
specifics about maybe what you do at the college level versus youth level as far as coaching?
Yeah, I mean, so uh, sadly, this isn't. I don't think this is real recognized enough around the country. But youth coaching is all about development, not getting not focusing so much on the results. And certainly, as you get older and you play for higher level clubs, when you're getting into high school and then later in your high school career, the wins are a little bit more important. Um, but parents and coaches, directors, whatever, a lot of people often lose sight of child development, as athletes and as people, uh, in the name of winning, because a lot of parents, people, whoever, think that, oh, if my kid wins a ton, he's going to get a college scholarship, which isn't the case. I mean, I can tell you as a college coach, I could not care less, who wins a game when I go watch which team wins. I'm watching for specific players. It doesn't matter, what the result is to me. And in college, you're still trying to develop your athletes as people first. And I think that's the foundation of the job. As a college coach, we're preparing these players for the rest of their lives, whether or not that includes soccer. Maybe some of them will play professionally for a period of time, but at the end of the day, the ball drops for everybody, and you got to be ready to do something else with your life. So that's the foundation of our job, I think. But there is player development, but 4 years of college is a lot shorter than 15 years of your childhood. So there's more there's more pressure. You have less time to develop the players. You do need to win more because your job kind of depends on it. And if you don't win, then you don't have the credibility to teach the lessons you want to teach. Um, so that's, I mean, they're totally different beasts. Uh, and yeah, and I guess as one of the reasons I want to be a coach is to change the current culture of the way things are with youth soccer and even some aspects of college soccer in the U.S.
I love it. I love it. That's a fantastic goal. And you wrote an article on LinkedIn that you published in October 2017 that touched on a
Mm-hmm.
couple of things that we said. We will link to it in the video description and podcast show notes. People go check it out. But the title of the article is "What is Wrong with College Sports?" And to just sum it up a little bit, you more or less said that you also have to prepare these athletes for life, and that they are students. They're not just athletes. And so I think it's all very well said. But realistically, kind of in your opinion, how do we actually make that happen? Yeah, I don't even have solutions because it's such a complex issue, and it may be, a whole podcast in and of itself. But do you have any sort of ideas to get the ball rolling on making that happen?
On developing student athletes as people or just
Yeah, yes, because reading the article, you called out a lot of fantastic points, and you said that it's going to be tough, but I didn't know if you had any solutions, in mind that could realistically be implemented.
um I mean that's this discussion alone, you could talk for days about it, but just I guess to give some to make I don't like making generalizations, but to give some general statements about, at least in my opinion, what I think could move us towards solving that problem. Um, I think a lot of coaches, even though they do focus on winning a lot, you they still do a great job of developing their players. Coach K at Duke, he has to win basketball games to keep his job, and he's obviously done a really good job of that. But he's more importantly, I think he's done a fantastic job of developing his players, and you get that sense from interviews with guys who have played for him and reading articles about him or things he's said. So even though there are coaches out there who have to win, they still do, a lot of them still do a great job of developing their players. Um, and when I say that winning isn't as important, that doesn't mean that you don't try to win. We certainly try to win every single game. Um, and you're upset if you lose, and you should be. Um, but if you hang your hat on those results, if you assign your self-worth to wins and losses, and it's a pretty rough life to live.
So it's a
But
mindset and perspective that needs to kind of change.
right, and in general, I think, I mean, it's the culture of college sports, like what they've become today. I mean, it's obviously very commercialized, and there's massive TV deals and sponsorships and big money, which isn't inherently a problem, but the people who are kind of running the show with all that stuff, um, you know, have made it all a problem. And in my opinion, I think donors, in your high major athletic departments and programs, you know, donors run the show because, an AD's an AD at a high level has to be a good fundraiser and bring in new facilities and bring all this money to get different resources. And donors donate when teams win. They don't donate as much when teams lose. So we focus so much on like championships and winning as much as possible without losing. Um, and and for what reason? Like,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more important things in life.
Yeah, and I don't know if this could realistically happen, but I know overseas a lot of times athletics are completely separate from the education system. And if you want to play sports at universities and whatnot, they're all club and it's not really as competitive. I don't think this could realistically be implemented, but would a system like that, do you think, be beneficial in the US, or do you think again, that's more from the student athlete perspective, or do you think that the current system could function if people shift their mindset?
Oh yeah, I think the current system is awesome. Like no one else in the world has anything like the NCAA or NAIA, junior college, whatever level of college athletics it is. Um, no other country in the world has what we have, and it's awesome. And I mean, playing in front of your friends and fans and family in college is an incredible experience. And the fact that there's money involved in it and TV deals and all that sort of stuff isn't inherently a problem. It's just if we abuse it, then everything becomes a problem. So I think it's definitely a culture change and a mindset change is the answer, and certainly that's going to take a lot of people to do, but yeah, I think the way we have things is awesome.
All right, cool. I like the sound of that. So I feel like college soccer, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, has really gotten just bashed from a developmental standpoint in U.S. soccer specifically. And people are saying, it's with the rise of the development academies and all of that, you can kind of understand it in the rise of MLS to an extent. But you're the first person that we've had that's like legit in the weeds, like in the college game, and what I'll say kind of an expert on all of this. Where do you think the college game stands as far as development for professional players in soccer specifically?
Well, it's kind of it's kind of a loaded question. Uh, College soccer, college sports in general, they don't exist to develop professional athletes. Um, Certainly that happens. There are athletes, I mean, you immediately think of basketball and football. Those are the two biggest college sports, of course. Plenty of guys go pro from those avenues, but the mission of the NCAA has nothing to do with developing professional athletes. I mean, you can read it online, and I'm pretty sure I wrote it in that article on LinkedIn. Yeah, the mission of the NCAA is not at all about that. And but that doesn't mean that kids can't go pro from college sports, because of course it happens. But I do think that I can't speak to other sports because I'm not as knowledgeable about the sports science stuff, in baseball or basketball, football, whatever it is. But in soccer, at least, I know a lot of coaches are not happy with the way the current model of the season, how everything is so packed together. I mean, your preseason starts in August, and the NCAA tournament is done at the beginning of December. So and most teams are playing games September, October, November. So you're playing most of your regular season in 3 months.
And how many games is that, to give people a reference?
I mean, we have 18 regular season games typically. So we're playing 18 regular season games within the span of 3 months. And then we have prior to that regular season, there's, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks of preseason. And then starting in November, that's conference tournament and NCAA tournament. So, I mean, that's a lot of games, in a period of time. And we definitely don't have the appropriate amount of time needed to recover between games. So that, in the spring, there are so many restrictions about what we can do with the players and how often we can coach them. And those restrictions vary, at the different levels, D1, D2, D3, NAIA, junior college, all that sort of stuff. So the way it's structured certainly is not in the best interest of soccer players as soccer players specifically. You can make arguments that it's structured in their best interest as people, with giving them more opportunities to pursue whatever jobs that they have to work while they're in college, or study abroad experiences, or being involved in different student organizations, student government, whatever it is. But from purely a soccer perspective, I know a lot of coaches make the argument that the current model is not set up in the best interest of soccer players.
All right, really informative stuff. I'm loving this interview. I mean, you're an expert in so many different things, and I'm really enjoying your perspective on all of this. Let's get back to you and talk about your goals with coaching. So, do you want ultimately D1 head coaching job? Is that your goal? Are you aiming for MLS, like pro, beyond that, or right now? I know you're still on the younger side. Are you just kind of rolling with it, and seeing where things work out?
Yep, yeah, definitely on the younger side. I mean, I'm only 24. Um, my for the foreseeable future, I guess, and even foreseeable long-term future, if that makes sense, I would like to be, continue as a college coach, as my full-time job. I know I've met different college coaches who have gone on to the pro ranks. So I know that that's certainly a possibility down the road, but it takes a lot of talent and dedication and a lot of other things. But yeah, I mean, I love the college game. I love the institution of the NCAA, and college was a very formative period of my life, and my college soccer experience was definitely my favorite part of college, and one of the best experiences of my life. So I want to be able to pass that on to any kid who wants to come through and play college soccer. But mainly, the main reason if I had to put it down, if I had to put it in one sentence, excuse me, about why I wanted to coach, I would say it's to teach kids, student athletes, to live lives of fulfillment and not regret. Um, if you truly put forth, the optimum effort, in your soccer experience in college, and that doesn't mean working hard to the point where you're out of control and overexerting yourself. If you're working as efficiently as possible and doing everything you should, you will feel fulfilled by what you accomplish, whether or not you have positive results, regarding wins and stats and that sort of thing. And you won't have any regrets when you leave, your college soccer experience, because you know that you left it all on the table. And I think that lesson can then be applied to the rest of, any college kid's life, for whatever they choose to pursue in their career, and encouraging them to go after what they really want in life, and not settling, or not just playing it safe because they're afraid of taking a risk. That's definitely why I want to be a coach in general, not because I love coaching soccer, even though I do. That's the primary reason, and I think that I can have the greatest impact on college age kids.
Very well said, and all this is very inspirational. So I'm enjoying it. At Adolfo Lopez 1826 had a similar question, kind of along those lines. So, do you look forward to eventually becoming a head coach at some point, or are you kind of more happy being a behind the scenes guy? He mentions Buvac, who was the assistant coach at Liverpool, who is more just maybe involved on the training side, but isn't that front facing figure in the game. Do you want to be the head coach, or are you comfortable being an assistant?
Both. I mean, I certainly have the ambition to be a head coach. So I wouldn't say that that's not a goal, but loyalty is more important to me than a blinding sense of ambition to become a head coach. So if and as in college sports, you bounce around to a couple different schools over a few years, and that's not unheard of by any means. That's common. So I understand that I'm not going to be at Augsburg for my entire career. And even the next school I go to, I may not be at for my entire career. But if I end up, as a top assistant coach for a good college program, and things are right for my family and for the team and for whoever my head coach is, there's no, I'm not going to let some, blinding sense of ambition again kind of ruin a great situation. So maybe the time will be right where, if I'm 30 something years old and a top assistant coach, to move on to a head coaching job, or maybe the time will be right for me to turn that head coaching job down. It all depends on your life circumstances, your family circumstances, and what's best for that current program at the time.
Absolutely, great perspective on all of that. So we've been heavy into college, your background, and all of that. Let's lighten it up a little bit, talk a little bit more fun. See, you're rocking a U.S. kit now. Do you have any teams that you support and follow? I'm assuming the U.S. men's national team, but do you follow them and/or any others?
Yeah, I mean, I love watching USA games, of course. My mom just got me this jersey for Christmas, so pretty
Looks
excited
good.
about that. Thanks. And in general, I would say I'm not like a diehard fan of any club. I kind of pull for Man U a little bit, but I just like to watch whatever games are on whenever I can, whether it's MLS games, Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, any country.
So what do you think about U.S. under Greg Berhalter? Are you excited? Are you following the January camp at all? Are you looking forward to these upcoming friendlies that are happening, or are you just kind of rolling with things? What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I'm definitely excited. I've been following along with some of the articles that have been written about the current camp that's going on. And obviously it's exciting to have a new coach. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see where he takes us. You can't make any judgments about him before he even gets started. So, got to give the team a chance and see where they end up with all the upcoming friendlies and then as World Cup qualifiers get going too.
Yeah, for me, I'm just excited because he seems like he really has an idea of how he wants to play, and he just seems like really up for it, really committed. And so I'm very excited about the team. I don't know how excited I am about these upcoming friendlies, but I've been reading articles about the camp as well, and just I'm excited about Greg and just the level of detail he seems to be bringing to the job. So I'm excited about that. Now, you kind of mentioned you're a United fan, but you're not following too closely. I mean, what do you make of their season? The whole Mourinho experience. And now under Solskjaer, they're absolutely flying. So, what do you make of their season? Can they get Champions League or, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, they've obviously been on quite the roller coaster this season so far. And losing a head coach, in the middle of your season is certainly a difficult thing to deal with, whether it's for the best or for the worst. So we'll see how they turn things around, and hopefully they can end up, in the top four.
All right, cool. Fair enough. All right, we have a couple more Twitter questions here, and then we'll get to my last question. But first one, and I forgot, excuse me, that he asked this, and I already kind of touched on it earlier, but I want to get your perspective on it. At Michael_Ward01 asked the differences between D1, D2, and D3 in college. So I gave my perspective earlier. Tom, what's your perspective on the differences between those three?
Yeah, so I guess I'm talking now about men's college soccer specifically, not women's, not any other sports. Men's college soccer is a D1, D2, D3 it's such a mix. It's not like what you think of when you think of D1, D2, D3 basketball. Division I basketball is a totally different level than Division II, and that's totally different level than Division III. In men's soccer specifically, for a lot of different reasons. One of them being that there aren't that many NCAA men's soccer programs in the country compared to other sports. It's a much greater mix of talent. Greg and I here at Augsburg, we always say that, we'd be happy to go play, all kinds of Division I level programs, Division II level programs, and not necessarily, your top 30 Division I teams in the country, but your, mid majors, whatever they may be. There's really not that much of a difference between your, top Division III programs, and we were a pretty good Division III program this past season. There's not that big of a difference between us and, a mid-major D1 team or a random D2 team that you pick out. So, and a lot of things dictate where kids go to school that have nothing to do with D1, D2, D3. I mean, in Minnesota, for example, there's no men's Division I soccer. There's the University of Minnesota here, and they have a good club program, but they don't have an NCAA program similar to Illinois, where I went to college. So there's no Division I school in Minnesota that's attracting the top talent. So, there are a lot of really good players who could play at the Division I level who are going to all these D3 schools in the area because that's what's available to them if they want to be, in the state of Minnesota. And we get kids coming up from Chicago and even kids come, they come to school, to certain schools in our conference, the MIAC, out from California and all over the place and overseas. So this is what I tell recruits all the time when we give recruiting presentations to different high school groups, about how to find the right place for you is don't base it off of D1, D2, D3. I mean, you can certainly have a goal like I'm going to be a Division I soccer player. And if that's a goal of yours, certainly go for it and focus on the process that's going to get you there. And hopefully it does. But if it doesn't, there are still really good spots you can end up if it's a Division II or Division III program. But finding the right fit for you as a player is what's most important, with the coaching staff, and the culture of the program, the way it's run logistically. You got to think about, you might be going to a Division II school, but you might have travel times where you're going, 8+ hours to different games because you're so far away from everybody else and you've got long road trips. And you might think that, oh, it's D2, it's better than D3. Well, if you're at, a certain Division III school, you might have better competition, in a closer area. So you're not having to drive 10 hours to play a level of competition that might not be as high as you want. So there's lots of things that dictate.
One other question I had just along this D1, D2, D3 line, and I don't know how much you know about it, but I know a fully funded D1 program is about 10 scholarships. It's a little less than 10 scholarships right now. I don't know, and not a lot of, I mean, I would say arguably the majority of D1 programs aren't even fully funded.
Correct, yeah.
How does that flow down D2, D3 levels?
So yeah, D1, I think the exact number is 9.9 scholarships for men's soccer. I'd have to double check that. Division II, I can't remember the exact number. In Division III, there are no athletic scholarships. So any Division III sport across the board, no athletic scholarships, but your academic scholarships are pretty significant. So what you'll receive just based on your high school grades, ACT score, whatever it is, that could be pretty large. I mean, we've got guys who come into Augsburg, for example, and they'll get just based off their GPA and ACT score, they'll get $26,000 off right off the bat. So your academic aid is huge. And yeah, I mean, and Division I coaches have to be really intelligent and strategic about how they manage their scholarships because, they've got to figure out the players they want, how badly they want each player, and how badly each of those players needs certain amounts of financial aid. So it's a total, it's a giant puzzle of figuring out who you're going to give a full ride to, who you're going to give a half ride to, who you're going to just pay for their books, who you're going to give a few more $1,000 to. It's a different animal.
It's incredibly confusing. And I went through the process coming through high school and not understanding it. I mean, I was the oldest son in my family. And so I was the first one to go through it and we didn't fully understand things. And so offered partial scholarships at universities, not understanding that, a fully funded program. I mean, they offered partial scholarships to a lot of people. And then the longer you're on the team, maybe your scholarship escalates. And, I didn't understand a lot of that. And so that was definitely a point of frustration, for me coming through the process. So it's interesting interesting, hearing all of that experience. Last Twitter question we have here is from @WorldHotspur. If you could change one thing that would drastically improve soccer in the U.S., what would it be, Tom?
That is
it's a loaded question. I know I'm just throwing that out. No preparation whatsoever. Yeah. So if you want time to think on that.
If I could change, I mean, actually, yeah, I think I have an answer for this. If I could change one thing about soccer in the U.S., regardless of level of play, whatever, it would just be to somehow, magically have more people just playing like pickup soccer, men's league soccer, women's league, whatever it is. Like growing up, I mean, I played all different sports growing up and basketball in high school as well as soccer. But I wish, and I was lucky enough to play in college, but I wish that I was, had the opportunity to play more pickup soccer as a kid because we played basketball and baseball and football all the time. But, it's tough to find a group of friends, or, a large enough group of friends who want to go play soccer to where you can go play, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5, whatever it is. And if you look at other countries across the world, I mean, I've seen this when I've traveled abroad, and I've been to a lot of different countries. Like, I feel like there's pickup soccer games in little courts and cages wherever you go. And so it's certainly not ingrained in our culture as much as it is overseas. But yeah, I wish it was, I wish it was.
Yeah, me too. More futsal courts. They literally so my building overlooks a park out here in San Jose, right near the SAP Center. And they just took one of the tennis courts and just converted it to a futsal court. And so we need more things like that happening. The earthquakes must have been involved because everything's branded with the earthquakes. But yeah, I'm trying to think. There was somebody who was on a podcast recently. It may have been Total Soccer Show. I can't remember the exact podcast, but he was saying we need to have less of that because that's a huge sort of investment by MLS, which is fantastic. It's awesome that they spent a ton of money to convert those courts. But this guy was making the argument that you don't need all of this glitz and glamour and this, branding and putting in brand new courts because those are, in some instances, hundreds of thousands of dollars. This probably wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you got to resurface things. I mean, you can take already existing courts for a few hundred to a few $1,000s and just convert basketball courts or just make them still useful for basketball and just implement some of these other ideas. So we're starting to see it a little bit more. Kyle Martino just came out with something, he's trying to implement all over the country. And so this, I'm totally on board with you. I think, your point is fantastic. And it seems like people are trying to make it happen, which is encouraging to me. So I'm excited about that. Tom, is there anything else I didn't ask before I ask my final question?
I think you asked a lot of good stuff, so go for it.
All right, cool. So we like to end this on a positive note. This whole podcast has been pretty awesome, fascinating, and interesting. A lot of negativity in the world. So we like to keep things positive and ask, what's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world? You can take that however you want. So what's the thing you're most excited about?
In my personal soccer world?
Personal soccer world, fandom, however you want to take the question. There are no rules here.
I mean, I think for our team here at Augsburg, seeing what happens next season, we had so in 2017, we were very average on paper, finished 8, 9, and 1, and culturally things were rough, and we made a lot of changes personnel wise in the offseason with bringing in a bigger class, cutting some players as well. And then, boom, in 2018, this past fall, we had a huge turnaround and made the NCAA tournament for the third time in program history, first time since 2010. So that was kind of a 0 to 100 turnaround. And so I'm pretty pumped to see what happens this next fall, given that our incoming class is really, really talented. And, we've got the right people on board from the returning players. So things are looking pretty good. It was a fun season this year. It's been a fun off season, and we'll see what happens in the fall.
I love it. I love it. So listeners, make sure to go check out, Tom's stuff. We have the program Twitter account linked in the video description and podcast show notes. And we'll also link that LinkedIn article. Tom, if you have anything else you want me to plug, we'll throw that in the description as well. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. This was really cool. I've never been on a podcast before, so it's fun.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. We're always happy to be a first, and you did fantastic. It was a lot of fun for me. Hopefully it was a lot of fun for listeners as well. Again, really awesome, fascinating stuff behind the scenes, all kinds of details. And I loved hearing your perspective on so many different things. So with that, that brings us to the end of the podcast. People who have joined us on YouTube, thank you so much for being here. And Tom, thanks again. And we'll talk to you soon. See you, everybody.
Yep. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.
See ya.